Okay, thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Manuel, um, and I'm the Climate Resilience Fellow. And I have been with New Voices Rising for 3 years now. And I decided that I would do my summit project on my work as a whole, with resilience and resilience hubs. And then I will propose where I think a resilience hub should be built and why. So first, I want to give a brief definition of resilience and why it's important and what it can look like. Next slide, please. So what is resilience? So it's the ability to bounce back from a setback or a challenge. So an example, so it's like when you're faced with an obstacle, see the positive and use it as an opportunity to tackle the situation. So a real world example of this could be as simple as like breaking your leg. And although it may keep you from playing outside, you can see it as an opportunity to read a book and learn something new that could help you in the future. Um, so um, so it's important to build. Why is it important? It's important to build resilience in communities to reduce and fight the inequalities and injustices that are in the front line of marginalized communities. And what can resilience look like? So over the years, sorry, this can range from things like services that promote public health, building parks, better housing, to expanding and encouraging collaboration and communication among the community. Next slide, please. I really was first introduced to resilience and resilience hubs last summer when I had my externship with Jill. And it really sparked my interest with the topic and helped me choose the position I wanted for the upcoming fellowship. So in the beginning of the academy, we get to choose a local organization to work with on active environmental and social justice policies, campaigns, or programs. And so one of the options was food systems and resilience with Jill, where we got to learn about resilience, resilience hubs, and even got to make some pies. So Tuesdays we would talk about the importance of resilience hubs and what they should include. And Thursdays were our designated days for pies. And we learned about resilience and more specifically food resilience and sustainability in the agriculture business and how important it is for locally sourced foods to be affordable for all and how much better it is for the environment. So next slide, please. A big part of the externship was learning about how and what practices are used in the agriculture business, which oftentimes involve pesticides and insecticides, which are both not good ways to protect plants and get rid of bugs. So we learned that the better alternative are native plants that are known to get rid of bugs and even hot water. Next slide, please. In this photo, we were actually in the middle of peeling our peaches to make peach pie. Next slide, please. In this photo, we were making apple pies. We had already peeled the apples and cut them, and we were getting ready to put the dough on top. Next slide, please. So at the end of summer, after I had learned about resilience of a community and how important it is, and how useful resilience hubs can be, for low-income communities, I decided that I would do my summit project on resilience hubs. In my externship, we talked about how community gardens could provide produce boxes like we have been getting. So that's something I explained that that could be implemented. So we talked about what they can offer, which included materials and services that only can help in a natural disaster, but all year round. And then I gave two propositions where I thought a resilience hub could be built in my community while thinking about where the most convenient place would be and where there could be enough room. And I had chosen Point Pinole and Fernandez Park. Next slide, please. Here, this is one of the slides that I included. I included, what a resilience hub is for. So not only a place for shelter, but a place for food, water, energy, medical support, translation services, and even something as simple as directions. Next slide, please. In this slide, I talked about, I went more specific on what those like kind of services would include. So such as translators and medical support, And then, I talked about how important it is for to have how important it is for clean energy to be implemented, such as solar panels and windmills. And so, yeah, and then, when it came to food, I figured, we a big part of the resilience hub would be a garden. So, why not use that fresh produce to supply the community with? And yeah, and it's just simple supplies such as toothbrushes, toilet paper, blankets, and even air filters. Yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, in this first photo I drew out where the first where resilience hub could be built in my community, and I chose Fernandez Park. And because I figured that there was a lot of space that isn't occupied in the park, so I think that resilience hub could be much larger there. And so yeah, so I drew out where the windmills could be built, and there's already existing bathrooms that could be used, where the garden could be placed, and yeah, and where the showers, and because there are already buildings that have solar panels built on top of them, we could use those existing ones. But yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, and then my second location was Point Pinole. And I figured that this place would be just much more convenient because of the vast land that could be used. So that yeah, we could implement a large solar panel that could really be benefited by the community, and yeah, even larger windmills, and even a bigger resilience hub that could maybe even be occupied by more people, and yeah, yeah. Next slide, please. So yeah, and we actually recently had this workshop, I believe, yeah, a couple months ago, and yeah, and so it was a workshop in which Christy and I led, to let the residents of Oakland know what resilience hubs are, and why they're so important, how they can serve the community immensely, because they are community serving facilities that have been enhanced to assist locals and plan for the distribution of resources and services before, during, or after natural disaster. And explain that the goal of a resilience hub is to improve city-to-city cooperation and peer-to-peer help. Yeah, and so the activity that I helped lead was a bubble diagram. And yeah, so the main goal of this workshop was really hear out what the people of Lions Creek had to say about and what they wanted to see in their soon-to-be resilience hub. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, actually, this is a picture in which Christy the activity Christy led, and so yeah, they were actually able to make collages about what they would like seen in a resilience hub and what kind of sustainable practices could be used. But yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is actually a picture of the activity I helped lead. And so yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it was like a bubble activity where you could essentially draw out what could be used in the area that the Resilience Hub was being built in, and where those things could be placed. But yeah, next slide, please. And yeah, in this photo, there was also a posted activity where we could all post in the sticky notes that we were given, just what we would, where everybody would like to have seen in the Resilience Hub. And yeah, it just really gave everybody an opportunity to see everybody's ideas. But yeah, next slide, please. And so yeah, so actually this is another workshop that Christy and I led more recently, actually. But yeah, in this workshop, Christy and I collaborated with the APIN youth and revolved around resilience hubs, but was also about resilience work done in the Bay Area that APIN had done. And we really tried to bridge it with the work NVR had done. So yeah, it was because both groups already knew about resiliency, we wanted it to be more conversational, which allowed for a more collaborative experience. And yeah, we really just wanted to hear more about the experiences that APEN and New Voices had with resiliency. Next slide, please. And so yeah, this was just actually our first slide, our introduction slide for our workshop. But yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, and so yeah, so these are some of the questions we had asked. What is resiliency? What is your experience with resiliency? and how and what environmental and social justice issues have tested your community's resilience. But yeah, next slide, please. And yeah, so we just had a checkout question at the very end. So this was our concluding slide. And we just asked, has your definition of resilience changed, or had it stayed the same? And why? And so yeah, I think I think the main objective of our workshop was really just to hear if they really had learned anything, and really just to hear out any experiences that they had. But yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, and so yeah, this brings me to the proposition that I had made for the next Resilience Hub. And so yeah, I believe that Baby Hunter's Point could really benefit from a Resilience Hub because of the history of the town and the people. And so yeah, so it was around 1939 when the Second World War had started. And that was around the time they started building naval shipyards, which were exposed to substances because of the bombs that they were making. And although they attempted to clean and repaint them, they completely were botched over and over again. And yeah, and so it was considered actually a Superfund site in 1989. And so which is which is land that is extremely polluted and contaminated and very hazardous to people. And yeah, so despite it being a Superfund site, they decided to start building more apartments and housing for people. But the dirt that they were building on was tested and was contaminated with harmful chemicals that people would breathe in. And yeah, in the nearby communities, which were mainly Black and brown the community. So at first it was seen as a good thing because it provided jobs for many people. But in the summer of 2005, they began to dig to make more houses for people in the city. And as we know, in the city is very busy. But they didn't want to warn people because of the chemicals that would go into the air due to the digging. And so they eventually decided that they would keep people home, but it was a very short-term solution. And so yeah, so keeping people home is virtually almost impossible because people have jobs and kids have school. So the people eventually kept breathing all these toxic chemicals. And so yeah, so they so yeah, since then people Baby Hunters Point health have reflected, a lot of health issues such as asthma, cancer, respiratory illnesses, and heart disease. And so, yeah, so I know that resilience hubs typically just apply basic medical supplies, but I think that, implementing more health programs that, could help maybe teach people at Baby Hunters Point, ways that they could eat healthier and even supply people with gardens so that they wouldn't have to worry about buying expensive organic food to get their nutrition. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.